Hello and welcome back to the Chef Share Sessions on EPCC TV, done in conjunction with El Paso Community College Culinary Arts. I'm Chef Rosser back with you again, and today we're going to be making consomme. Consomme is a very classic dish, and it's simply a clarification of a stock or broth. Now, I hope you guys enjoy this segment. As always, remember to like, follow, share these videos, and always please give us suggestions for any upcoming videos you'd like to see. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so as far as a consomme, what we're going to be looking at is as far as ingredient selection, and we'll talk about the stock in just a minute. But when we're clarifying a stock, that means we are taking out all of the impurities. And if you make stock at home or in a restaurant setting, it's not going to be crystal clear, right? So what we need to do for presentation is to clarify that stock. And the way we're going to do that is with protein coagulation. So we're going to start out with a really good stock, and I'll bring out the stock in a minute. I'm just keeping it chilled to the very last moment. But we want to look at proteins to coagulate, to clarify that stock, to bring out all of the particles, and what we should end up with is a crystal clear soup for preparation. So the first thing is start out with a great quality stock, something with a lot of gelatin, good flavors, good body, good color. To that, we're going to add several proteins. Now, we're going to be using a chicken stock today, and since we are using a chicken stock, we're going to use lean chicken meat in the clarification, and this is a couple of chicken breasts that I've fabricated. So, and you'll notice no skin, no fat, a little bit of connective tissue, and that's just fine for this. The other protein that we're going to be using is albumin, and that comes in abundant quantities in egg whites. So here I've got about 12 ounces of egg whites that we're going to be using. We're also going to be using aromatics. So for our aromatics, I've got celery, carrots, and onions, our mirepoix vegetables. And to that, I'm going to add some leeks. Leeks add a wonderful aromatic quality. If you're not familiar with them, please try using some at some point. They have just a beautiful earthy onion quality to them. We want to make sure that we are only using the white portion of the leek, not this dark green portion that's fibrous. You'll see here that this leek is fairly dirty. When you're using leeks, you need to wash them very well, and the ones I'm going to be using are washed very well. This is just for demonstration. I've also got some chopped herbs to add aromatic quality. In here I've got some thyme, rosemary, and a little bit of parsley. And then finally, we're going to add some acid in the form of tomatoes. Now, what I do is I cut these in half on an equator cut and squeeze out the seeds because they can tend to be bitter. So I'm just squeezing out the tomatoes, and I'll show you what all of that looks like. This is my aromatics and my tomatoes. Everything is going to go into the processor, and it's not the prettiest process to get started. And one thing that I really need to point out to you guys is that this process is very expensive, it's time consuming, so that's why you don't see consommes on many restaurant menus. And if you do, and if it's made properly, it will definitely be a memorable food experience. This is one of the great skill sets to have as far as culinary arts. So we're going to go ahead and puree all of this stuff up into a really fine, almost paste-like consistency. Mix it with our stock. We'll get started on that in just a minute, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this stock now. This is a really nice stock that we made in-house, but it's not very clear. There's a lot of gelatin in here. It's got a great flavor, great texture, but what we want to do with this is we want to clarify it. So we want to get a crystal clear finished product out of this. And to that, we are going to add our ingredients. And once we bring those ingredients together, that's known as the clear meat or the raft. So we're going to go ahead and start that production now. We're going to put our chicken breast in. we'll get our aromatics in, and then we're going to get all of our vegetables in. And this is, like I said earlier, this is very time consuming and it can be really expensive to do, but if the results you're looking for are a crystal clear soup preparation, this is definitely the way to go. I'll squeeze the rest in there in a little bit once I break up some of this bulk. And I'll get the last thing I'll do is I'll add the egg whites and some seasoning. So I'm going to go ahead and pulse this down. I'm going to add about half of my egg whites. Get everything going. There we go. And I'm going to try to get a little bit more of my mirepoix vegetables in there and the rest of my egg whites. Now this is enough to clarify about 2 gallons of stock. So I'm gonna be doing it with about a gallon of stock. So I probably won't use all of this, but for demonstration purposes, I just wanted to show you the larger batch. Get the rest of my egg whites in. And we want this in really fine pieces. The finer the chicken and the aromatics are cut up, the better clarification we're going to have. I'm going to go ahead and add to this a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of salt. I'm doing this because doing a clarification is going to pull out a lot of flavor from our existing stock. That's one of the reasons why we add so much flavor into the clear meat process with all of the aromatic vegetables, the herbs, and of course seasoning. I'm going to get this pureed in. Now some chefs may tell you wait till the end to do this. Some may say go ahead and do it in the beginning. I like to get it out of the way and then adjust the seasoning as needed later on. And I want those black, the little flakes of black pepper to come out with the clear meat but leave their flavor behind. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get our stock into the pot. And you'll see that it's kind of thick and viscous, which is exactly what we want out of a stock. And that there's no visible fat in the stock. We want to try to minimize fat in this production as much as possible. So I carefully strained that stock and degreased it before I chilled it down for this process. So I'm going to add about half of our clear meat to this and mix it up. And this is really kind of a gross process. Oop. As long as I don't make a mess. Just a little more. There we go. That's about half of our clear meat. And I'm going to mix it up. And I'm going to add just a touch more. I want to make sure that this gets done very well. Okay, so I've got about 2/3 of our clear meat in there. We'll set this aside. I can use that for another batch. Clean up my area. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get this on the stove now. You can let this sit for about 30 minutes, to let those proteins dissolve into the liquid. Perfectly acceptable, which helps with the coagulation. It's a minor thing. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. But I like to start with cold ingredients. You can start this hot as long as you put ice cubes in your clear meat mixture and cool down your stock some. You're not going to get as good a product out of that. But let's go ahead and get this on the stove. We're going to put this on a medium-low heat until it comes to a simmer. We're going to stir it every few minutes to keep those egg whites from sticking to the bottom of the pot as it's heating up and scorching. So we need to gently stir it every few minutes. Once this comes to a simmer and we see that clear meat forming a raft up on the top, we stop stirring. And then we're going to simmer it for about an hour to an hour and a half until it's nice and clear. So we'll come back and we'll check on this, but we're going to get this on the stove right now. Our consomme is on now with our clear meat raft inside. So when stirring this every few minutes, I want to use a rubber spatula and I want to gently go down all the way to the bottom and just scrape the surface of the bottom to ensure as the pot heats up that the egg whites aren't sticking to the bottom of the pot because that will ruin your batch. So just give it a little swirl. You don't want to stir it up too much. And as this heats up, all of those proteins, the albumin and from the egg whites and the chicken breast are going to coagulate and start raising up to the top, and we'll get that really distinct clear meat raft. Remember, at that point, you don't want to stir it anymore because all you will be doing is putting all of those small particles back into solution and you'll have a botched batch. So once this does come up to temperature, we're going to break a hole in the middle of it so that the heat has somewhere to escape and that it's also going to act as a filtering device. And once that happens, I'll show that to you, and we'll let this simmer for about an hour from that point in order to get our clarification. So depending on the size of the batch, you're going to want to let it simmer at least an hour to an hour and a half, and then we'll go through the process of straining and presenting for you guys. All right, we'll be back shortly. So our consomme with the clear meat added has been simmering for about 30 minutes. We've been stirring it every few minutes. I stopped when I see the raft starting to come above the water line. And you can see that right over here. And that means that those proteins are coagulating. They become buoyant and they come up above the line of the liquid in the pot, which is a good sign at this point. If you notice, if you can see down here on the side, you can see that liquid. It's clear, it's a lot clearer, but it still needs to simmer for about 45 more minutes. So what we need to do in order to facilitate the clarification process is I'm going to poke a hole in the middle of the raft, just very gently, just move this product to one side, get my spatula down in there, and clear a hole here. And what's going to happen is as the heat builds up in here, it's going to look for a place to escape. And over here on the side is one area, but we need to give it a vent in the middle in order for it to do its job better. So there we go. Now we're seeing some of those egg whites come up. There we go. We just want to be very gentle about this. And you don't have to see the broth through that just yet, but we want to give that heat an escape valve. All right, so we'll come and take a look at this in a few minutes and see how that creating that hole in the raft helps facilitate the clarification. So you can see our raft is fully formed. That hole that we've punched in the middle gives us a really good window down into the consomme. We can still see some particulate in there. However, that is all coagulated proteins, but you'll notice that it's crystal clear beyond that. So at this point, our consomme is done, and we're going to very gently extract the consomme from the pot. But having this time lapse shows you the progression of how this consommé process works. I hope you've enjoyed this. So now let's go ahead and carefully strain our consommé in order to get a finished product for evaluation. All right, so I've turned off our consommé, and I'm going to start carefully ladling our finished product out of the window that we've pierced in the center. And I will be getting some particulate up in there, but I'm using a mesh strainer with a coffee filter in it in order to filter out that particulate. And I'll show you another way to do this that's equally as effective. Ideally, if we're doing consommes, we're going to do a large batch in a pot with a spigot on it at the bottom that will help not disrupt the raft, because the last thing we want to do is disrupt that raft, because it can put all of that particulate back into our finished product. Using a coffee filter works very well, but there is still movement of some of that particulate. So we're just going to take a quick look at this method, and then I'm going to switch over to a different method to show you that I've used in the past. All right. So just very carefully ladling out of there. And what I want to show you is our beautiful product at the bottom, right? Nice and crystal clear, beautiful consommé. So let me show you the other method that I've used in the past. And I'm just going to set this aside for now. And this method involves using a chinois, which is a very, very fine mesh strainer. You can find them at most restaurant equipment stores. You can also find them online. But what I do is I go right into the window with the point of the chinois and then ladle out of the bottom of the chinois. Because that super fine mesh is going to help keep all of that particulate out. And you could go through another strainer, through a coffee filter, or through cheesecloth as well. All right? So, that is that method. And I'll come back to that in just a little bit. But at this point, I'm going to set all this stuff aside, and I want to present some for you guys to see as a finished dish. All right, so I'm going to take this that we've ladled out. It's really nice and fresh and hot. And bear with me one second. Let me get my bowl. I have a bowl here of Brunoise Vegetables, and in here I have some parsnips, some carrots, some mushrooms, some celery, and some leeks. These have been blanched in salted water, and this will be our garnish. I've also got a nice little crouton I'm going to go grab for you guys. I've got a French press. This is one of my favorite ways to serve consommé, because I can add aromatics to the press. And in here I've got some garden fresh rosemary and thyme. And I'm just going to pour this in here. I'm going to let that hot liquid steep those herbs, and then I'll press it through and serve it for you. But I'm going to let it sit in here. See how beautifully crystal clear it is? That's a great looking consommé. I'm going to go get a little crouton to float on this, and then we'll serve it up. All right, so our herbs have steeped in there for a couple of minutes. I've got my setup here with my crusty little figure 8 crouton. So we're just going to press this down, and look at that beautiful crystal clear consommé. And we're just going to gently pour this over that, and down goes our crouton to soak up all of that beautiful flavor. And that is our finished consommé. Thanks again for joining us for our Chef Share sessions. We hope you liked this demonstration of consomme, and as always, like us, follow us, share these videos, and let us know if you have any suggestions for future videos you'd like to see. Take care, and we'll see you next time.